is a leader in their organization and in their teams. And so don't think about it or frame it in your mind as like, okay, this is what my LT is doing, this is what the execs are doing. Each and every one of you have your voice, and all of your voices matter. And so that's something to also consider when we think about AI transformation. And then going from the private industry and the public sector, both of them have discipline. Discipline is something that both Pam as well as Cesar talked about. There's a little bit of difference around the governance, but for the public sector, you're really talking about as a guinea pig, one person that's starting off because it's more in a higher visible area and you're not competing for profit, and then everybody is learning off of what the person in front of them has done. So that's some key takeaways that you can think of that. Moving into really responsible AI and just talking a little bit to anchor us from a responsible AI perspective, because we often challenge, the urgency and then adding guardrails, which is slowing us down, and the compliance, which is really slowing us down. One thing that we do at Microsoft is we have a different responsible AI process for lower risk known scenarios. So things that we already know, that we are well aware of what those risks are, they have a lighter responsible AI process versus some of the high risk or sensitive use processes that we have there. That's where they're going to have a deeper responsible AI risk testing mitigations that they have that are employed there. So discipline and urgency and guardrails are really ensuring and allowing teams to AI transform all of their organizations in speed. Moving into our next area here, I'm going to go back to you, Pam, here. And from your experience, what has to change at the leadership or operating model for AI to move from experimentation to enterprise value?
Oh, gosh. How long have you got? Right, so... and we're learning a lot. We're actually learning a lot. We're learning a lot in terms of ourselves and our own transformation, but then also from our customers as well in terms of their transformations. And certain, if you like, recipes, we call them recipes, are emerging, right, for us. As we think about, what's different. And those recipes break down into three different approaches. The first is persona-based, and I'll come back to that. But that's, if you think about AI as your assistant, and all of us will have used some sort of AI as an assistant, be that in our personal lives or in our professional lives. The second piece is AI-enabled workflows. So, taking a process and applying AI into critical points in that process, or a workflow and applying AI into the critical. And the third one is what we call AI incubator. So if I think about the first one very much in terms of the persona, in fact, tomorrow I've got to meet with a couple of retail customers, and from their perspective, it'll be, for example, looking at the role of a store manager. All right, and actually breaking down for that store manager exactly the work that the store manager will do, day in, day out. What are the jobs? We call them jobs to be done in Microsoft. That's the language we use. And then looking at how we can apply AI to assist that store manager. So maybe they can be more responsive if there are different weather patterns, which means that inventory needs to be different. Or they've suddenly got somebody who's off ill, and suddenly they've got some shift issues or whatever to work around. So just enabling that store manager to be better informed, to be able to make decisions in the moment with insight and data and intelligence, enabled in that way. So that's very much the persona-based. If I look at the AI-enabled workflow, one of the things that we did recently, and you may be aware of this, Alteryx, is we have almost 1 billion customers at Microsoft. And so customer vetting and onboarding of customers is a key one of our processes in terms of risk and governance, which you'll be very aware of. We AI-enabled that workflow and improved the speed of it, the velocity of it 17 times versus where it is running currently, which saved us 146,000 hours of effort. Now, that's because of the scale of our organization, so our numbers in terms of impact are big. But that's just taking AI, looking at where the friction is in the process, and then applying it to the workflow. The last approach in terms of recipe, for me, is one of the most exciting, and that's the AI incubator. So imagine you've got a greenfield site. You've got a greenfield opportunity. You're unconstrained by existing legacy. And so you ask the team to completely rethink. It might be a new business model, a new product to market, a new service. We put the team to think about our contact center and our contact center processes, our customer service processes, and got them to reimagine how we could use autonomous agents in some of those contact center processes, which completely transformed first-time handling of calls by over 36%, and without impacting customer sat. Because this is the thing that's really important for us is, the customer experience couldn't be negatively impacted. And so we preserved customer sat. Customer sat didn't go down, it actually went up, but we handled case time 36% faster, using that kind of AI incubator approach. So, in terms of answering your question, what needs to be different, is we're actually looking at, when we think about our use cases, which of those different recipes will be most applicable, and then applying those recipes as we drive that AI change.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And so when we think of recipes, we have the persona recipe, which is really putting yourself in the shoes of the customer or what you're doing. And then I heard the workflow persona or recipe as well, which is ultimately continuous improvement. How are we looking at the process end to end to improve it? And then I know you had said earlier in today's session that using AI as a teammate and not as an add-on. And then the third recipe that I've heard you said was more incubation. So like in a perfect world and you had the world at your disposal, what is it that you would do? How would you rethink things? How would you reimagine things? And now kicking it over to you, Cesar, I want you to bring in here, because like the context of this equation, would you say that the public sector shares the same urgency as the enterprise organization?
Yeah, I think it's the way I would answer that is that there's urgency, but it's a very different way of thinking about urgency, right? And I think I addressed this earlier, but the public sector we just can't afford to move at the same speed as an enterprise, right? We just have to be considering all of the components of how the impact of AI is going to have on its constituents, and that becomes fundamental, right, for us to think about. I think about in our sector, right? Even over the last couple of weeks, you've heard, with the big beautiful bill, you've heard about, the states are going through these tremendous budget cuts, right? They're going into fiscal year 26 with, multi-billion-dollar deficits, right? And so part of the challenge is they're being asked, how do you deliver the same level of service with less budget, right? And so that's a real fundamental challenge, right? Because, as an agency is now looking inside and they're asking themselves the question of, well, it's not so much what services do we need to cut, but what administrative areas can we eliminate so that we can go a little bit faster, so that the focus becomes less on the paperwork and caseworker reviews and things like that, and more about helping and growing the constituents. So I think that's a really important and powerful point that I see that difference within our industry. And I even think of it from the lens of like, there's a couple of benefits, right? You think about SNAP and Medicaid, right? They're very fundamental. I think, like I said, growing up, these were part of my ecosystem, and so I think about those two, and they're very different systems, right? One is there's money for food, and the other one is your healthcare, right? And so what ends up happening is you start to look at these two systems, right? That they have very disparate, regulations and timelines and things like that. And so what happens when one breaks down? You're at risk of the person who is receiving these benefits to be without them for a period of time. And so I think what's happening at the state level is that they're putting in processes. So I think it's a positive, right, that we need to think about. It's forcing the states to rethink how they evaluate these systems. And this is where AI really becomes powerful, because it can operationalize that, right? So I think that's a really big component of that.
Yeah, so there's still urgency, but it's coming from a place of the deficit.
Yeah.
And then the urgency is really to help the people and the constituents be able to get all of the services that they really need, but from operating at that deficit.
Yeah.
And so to pivot a little bit away from deficit, what are some things that you're seeing, Cesar, in the public sector that gives you hope that we're on the right track?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing is that there's this shift, right, from, practical AI use to a more intentional AI focus, right? And I think that's really where it gives me hope, because you start to think about what are governments looking to do, right? Some of the questions that we get, there's a lot around, the basis for all of AI transformation is security, right? But at the end, you have a lot of our customers are asking us, well, how do we build, from an agentic standpoint, right? How do we build systems that has checks and balances to allow us to do the job better, right?
Yeah.
So without feeling like we're going to hope that a human can catch a bias down the line. So I think of it from the lens of two very real examples. We use with some customers a bias agent, skeptic agents, right? And these agents, what they do is that they're checking for biases, right? So, whether it's how is that built into that model, right? And when you think about the skeptic side, right? It's poking holes in the strategy. It's saying like, well, what impact is this going to have on the end user, right? So it starts to do that, and it's automating that process. So it's not putting that onus on the humans to work that into their process. And I think that's what gives me hope, is that they're seeing that, and they understand that that becomes such a critical component for them to be able to deliver the services that they've always been able to deliver, but doing it in a way that removes these biases, that removes all the things that existed before, and allows for there to be a lot more equality across the board.
Yeah, no, that's really impactful. So it's really being intentional about what we're doing, and then it's also using AI to help test AI and making sure that, hey, what is the opposite argument here? Where are their biases? Where are their skepticism? And then that helps, because ultimately humans are actually going in to train the AI to say, hey, this is what we're really looking for. This is what we're doing. So humans are still within the loop, but then we're using it to have greater impact at scale.
Yeah.
So we're at the 3 o'clock mark, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a quick light myth versus reality, so a lightning round here. And for each of you guys, what is one sentence, that is a common assumption that leaders make about AI adoption that constantly holds organizations back? So one assumption that leaders make about AI adoption that holds organizations back.
Can it be an answer we've already given?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
That it's a technology change.
Yeah, I would say that AI doesn't fix broken processes. It creates dysfunction.
Okay, and then one leadership behavior that matters the most for successful AI transformation.
Just one
Either-
word.
One leadership behavior. It can be a sentence.
It can be a sentence. Curiosity.
One word?
One word or a sentence.
I like to think of it from, because AI is scary, right? And I think, I look back 2 years when we started down this journey, even here at Microsoft, right? Like there were a lot of people that were scared around, and particularly our customers, right? And so I think of it as a reframe, right? I think we have to reframe what AI is, right? So, if you think about the biases that exist, if you don't necessarily account for the equity and the representation and all that, then yes, there's going to be biases, right? But I think if you go into it thinking about the fact that there's fairness, that there's transparency, that there's clarity, then there's hope, right? And AI becomes that ultimate equalizer, right? To allow us to then remove these biases, right? And so I think of it from the lens of, if you start to use AI in that process, it really becomes like a mirror, right? I mean, I think of it from like a mirror that exposes the dysfunctions that you probably wouldn't see with the human eye, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess, what's another example I've used with customers, like a referee that creates rules that are consistent across the board, right? And I think those are the things that we have to start really thinking about, is that AI really is a powerful tool, but we have to use it with discipline and intention. And I think that's ultimately the goal.
He had more than one word, by the way.
He did.
And several sentences. Several sentences. But anyway,
I wanted
I'll
to
let
catch
you
up.
off. All right, okay.
Yes. So thank you both, Pam and Cesar, for joining this panel. We definitely appreciate it. I want to kick it to the audience for questions. So, yes, question here in the front.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. When I have conversations about AI in different spaces, I hear the concern of AI replacing them or being unreliable, feeling like it is unreliable, decreasing their trust. So what methods have you found to be most effective in building trust in AI and highlighting how their work can actually be optimized using AI?
Do you want to go?
You're doing this every day.
I am, yeah. And it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, we're here every day.
And, you know, when we started on our journey, as I say, I've been with Microsoft a little over a year, and very early on we saw quite a level of resistance in some of our key sales roles, actually. And also because salespeople feel like they know it all anyway, and you know how can technology help them to be even better than they already are.
Yeah.
And so what we had to do was actually help people to understand, as I said, this frame that we call the jobs to be done. And so we have a number of different sales personas in Microsoft. There's account executives, there's technical specialists, for example, et cetera. And so we actually went and met them. So we sat in small group round tables, understanding and hearing from them, what were the challenges? What were they fearful about in terms of AI? What didn't they understand? And then we showed them for every single task that they were doing, how they could use AI. Now, this was really important for them because if we saw that from our own internal analysis, 70%, so 70% of our sellers' time is not in front of our customers. That is a huge opportunity from a productivity perspective. And so what we were able to show them is, actually, if we can help you to be able to do that, prepare for that internal meeting using AI, or better respond or synthesize this data from your customer, update your CRM, et cetera, it frees you up to spend more time in front of the customer and do the work you really love and enjoy. Use your creativity, use your intellect. But that's what it took. And in fact, this is a journey that we're on. And so we even are now still going deeply again with new sales teams actually in the Americas right now, again, these small group cohorts to help them to understand, because one of the reasons we have to do this is the technology is moving so fast. All right, so there's always this new tech for people to be able to use. So every time we've got the opportunity, we drop some of the tech into our tenant, we sit down and help people to understand. And so I think having that proximity and really showing empathy and listening and understanding has been the biggest unlock for us, right?
And we have one last question. I've already handed the mic off. Because I know I'm sorry, we're coming up on a hard stop.
Did you want the mic, Kurt?
No,
Yes.
I'll get to do my thing anyway.
No, I think it's one for Caesar, right?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adeswa. I'm with NASDAQ. I work in business operations. And I have learned so much through this panel from all three of you. And the biggest reminder that I've gotten is that AI is artificial intelligence. It's not human intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. So as we are training these systems to help us operate better and create these different processes, as you know, as someone that's also in operations, how are you using it to promote creativity and crafting that message to different companies and leadership so they understand that I may not be able to do what AI does, but I can use it to promote better processes and be more of a creator.
That's right.
Good point. Was that a question or?
Or an observation?
Oh, that was the question. How can we use AI to be more creative as business operators?
More creative as business.
I'll second the question and maybe add a little bit to it.
Yeah.
So every year families get together for Thanksgiving, right? And you're going to talk politics, you're going to talk sports. This last Thanksgiving, we didn't talk politics, we didn't talk sports. All we talked about was AI. And there was a clear, what I might call, generational divide. People who were in business and kind of on the front lines, right, really enthusiastic about what AI could do. Young people, creatives, people early in their career, on the opposite side of that, I might call it divide. Help us think about that. Like, how do we bridge that? Both in our personal lives and obviously in our professional lives, because it impacts both places. What's your sense of how we do that?
How to bridge the divide between perhaps what grandpa knows and what, grandkids?
Or me, a professional, let's call it 50-something, with my 20-year-old kid who's like, but Dad, I can't get a job because that nervousness.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you have to level set, right? I think it's the reality is that AI is not going anywhere, right? I mean, it's here to stay, and it's about embracing it. So embracing it and going on that journey with them, right? Because I think at the end of the day, I mean, I have a 28-year-old daughter that's in med school or just graduated med school, and one of the things that I talk to her about often, even when she was in school, is she was at USC, and I said, "Are you using AI?" And part of the first year at school, she wasn't using it, and I know how important it was. So she wasn't thinking about it. I think it was just more the fact that once the school triggered that for her, right? So I think I'll use the school example as whatever it may be. Insert their friends, insert whatever university they are, or insert whatever track they're on. I think it's going to be part of life, so it's just about embracing it and figuring out how you can use that to build on your own sort of strengths and weaknesses.
So I had the opportunity to speak at the Black Economic Forum in the summer. And this was one of the topics, actually, about this disparity in both comfort, confidence, and understanding. One of the, if you like, one of the changes that people felt that we could leverage here in the US in particular, which I think is stronger than us when we have in the UK, is the community and the community hubs, which might be around churches or, somebody in the audience was talking around their local barbers and, hair salons and whatever. And the people were thinking really creatively about how they can bring AI into those environments so people have the opportunity to learn and understand through those communities where they feel safe. Because that's the other aspect here, is you do it in places where you feel safe. I think the other point, for my 22-year-old niece who's just about to enter the workforce, what I've been saying to her and all of my nieces and nephews actually is be AI literate. All right, because you absolutely, whatever sphere you go into, you have to know AI, right? And she wants to go into communications, science communications, because she's a scientist. But, I've said to her, think about how AI can help you to be an even better communication scientist than if you weren't AI literate. And then the other thing, to the question on creativity, reframe AI and think about it as your thought partner, right? And create with the AI. Think about it as your thought partner. Don't think about it as your enemy or a challenge. Think about it as part of you, and you're kind of like back and forthing with your AI, asking it what you're missing, what you're not seeing, etc. What I'm seeing is when teams do that, that helps to start to unlock creativity.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Jaquan. Thank you both, Pam. Thank you, Caesar.
Thank you.
Let's hold this from Robert. All right, so I am between you and the bell. And I'm going to, I came up here and I said, hey, I have 5 minutes. So I had a 10-minuter. 8. Oh, good. I can use my almost 10-minute speech, or I can use my 8-minute, or I can use my 5-minute. When I think about today, I love the humor. There was so much humor in today, and humor, at least for me, it opens me up. It opens me up for things to kind of go deeper, for things to be more memorable. So I wanted to thank all the speakers and all the panels and all the folks who did the work today to really make this an impactful session. It certainly was that for me. So my name is Kirk Nelson. I'm the VP of RevOps here at NASDAQ. I've been here 6-7 months, and it's been an amazing journey. It's really a special place to work, and being a part of today and seeing this collaboration between NASDAQ and Microsoft it's amazing, and I'm looking forward to kind of making it bigger, making it spread even more. So so thank you for the folks who've done this. So the joke that stands out the most for me today was the this idea of, hey, I'm a Baptist and I like to tell stories and talk. And guess what? I'm a Jamaican, and we are story first, right? We always are telling stories. If we go to a wedding, it's going to be a story. If we go to a funeral, it's going to be a story. So I'll try to keep my story short. When I think about today, I kind of drew 3 themes, right? The first one was, your moment is here. We are at a very unique place in our country and in the cultural kind of openness of our country. And we have a very unique role to play, and your moment is here. Figure out your role, because we need you. We need you more than ever. I always kind of think, you know, when I'm a 60s person, or grew up, born in the 60s, came of age in the 70s and 80s, and I always thought, man, I missed my moment. If I was in the 60s, I would have been on the line, Black Panthers, da-da-da-da. And I could tell myself that story. But between all of us, we have our chance right now, more than ever, to be out there. So let's find it. And I think the first 2 gentlemen on stage, from a very intellectual perspective, that's what they were fundamentally trying to tell us, or at least that's what I took from it. When I think to the second group, it's creativity, right? It's juice. How do you bring your juice? And they ended with this, know your why, right? Because it's only when you know your why that you can bring your special secret sauce to making a difference, both in your professional life and in her personal life, right? I really took that away. It felt really moving and strong to me. The last one is about AI, and I gave a little bit of my story. I see this cultural divide with AI. As part of my role, I'm driving AI into sales teams across NASDAQ. And I tell this story to folks. When I was a kid, my dad owned an engineering company in Jamaica. Fundamental job was he had to figure out how to get water off the roads, because if water stays on roads, it erodes the roads and the roads get destroyed very fast. Right, so he had a civil engineering company that did that. So he had a lot of men, and they were digging trenches on the side of the road. And my mom said to him, hey, I saw this piece of equipment. It's called a backhoe. Man, it can dig fast. Today we have 50 people employed digging roads. With the backhoe, we needed 5. Those 45 men were not happy. They didn't have a job after we employed the backhoe. But guess what happened? We bought the backhoe. They won a job. They won another job. Why? Because the purpose of the company was to build and sustain roads. Jamaica was able to build more roads. We ended up having more people employed with the backhoe over time than if we had just been digging it on the side. AI is the same play, right? It's the same play. And yes, there's a short-term kind of shift, and we have to manage through that. But that's what I think about AI, kind of at the top level. To leave you with a joke, because I think jokes are important again to get you to be open. I told my team this like a month ago. I go for walks every day. You know what I do? I talk into my phone and tell them the challenges I'm having of the day. I have chapters and chapters of things I'm working at work, things I'm doing at home, right? If I know, hey, I need to have a conversation with my daughter, I need to be a little bit more soft, a little more open, I tell the AI exactly what I want my conversation to be, and it gives me kind of a little cheat, right? A little, hey, here's how you soften up, here's how. So I want to challenge all of you to really adopt AI, professionally and personally. It's really going to help. The joke is, I was thinking back to Key and Peele. You guys, everybody knows Key and Peele, right? And one of the most impactful skits for me was the Obama anger management guy. Yeah, everybody can laugh at that a little bit. I challenge all of you. Create your AI anger management. Create your AI joke teller. Create your AI talking to your daughter. Create your AI how to talk more effectively to your wife. Create your AI that tells you how to talk to your team more effectively. It's amazing. It is amazing. Adopt it personally, it will pay spades professionally. So that's my thought of the day in terms of key themes across the 3 groups. I just want to thank everyone again for putting on a fabulous show. I'm walking away very inspired, very motivated. So thank you. All right, we are I could think on time, and we're going to get ready to go down to do the ringing of the bell. I am looking forward to that. It's my first time having a chance to see that. I don't know the specific instructions of exactly where we go. Maybe someone can help me with that. But that's our next step. So thanks again, everyone. We're going to just be going out this door here and walking down. One more point. Hold on, guys.
All right, listen up, listen up, listen up. Guys, we're not done yet. If you are part of the bell ringing, we have to smoothly move from here to the, you can leave your things here, but we're gonna head downstairs to the studio. We have about 40 minutes or 30 minutes before everything really kicks off. So as you're moving down there, we're gonna get you situated and probably start taking some pictures. So thank you guys for coming. Hey, round of applause for our speakers again. And enjoy the bell ringing.